Good morning, Omkholo. Can you hear that I'm here?
Morning, Prof. I can hear you.
Yes, I have no electricity and it's not an ESCOM of load shedding problem. So I'm running off a device that I've set up, and I just hope that it would assist me throughout the meeting. I can't guarantee that at the moment.
Okay, that's
But
fine.
that I'm connected here. So yeah. Is it just you in the meeting so far and myself?
It's just you and I for now.
Okay, and you've got the technical support from our IT people. They around. Am I correct?
Yes, they're around as well.
Okay, good. Omkholo, I just sent you a message to say that I think Charlotte Lorbe, is that how we pronounce her surname?
Yes.
That Charlotte Lorbe is South Africa's High Commissioner to Singapore, and not the other way around, as you had said to me on the email where you gave me the times in the different zones.
Oh, is that what I...
No, you had said that she's Singapore's High Commissioner to South Africa. I think
Oh,
it's the other way
gosh.
around.
No, it's the other way around. No, it's the other way
Yes.
around.
Charlotte Lorbe, the person that used to be in the ANC in the Free State.
Yes, it's her.
Oh, okay. I have a very, very good idea who she is. I don't know her personally, but I do know, I think she was with our international relations department at some stage.
She was COO there. Yeah.
Yes. No, she's come through, I'm sure, the ANC Youth League. Yeah, I remember that, her name. So that's good. We really have an excellent lineup over here. And I mean, Yasmina Ben Soleimani, I mean, it's 5 a.m. in Morocco. So I'm really glad that we have this grouping of people going to assist us this morning. Okay, because of my challenges, I'm going to do a very, very, very short input at the beginning so that we can rather get things started.
That's fine. What I'm going to do now...
They all have confirmed in the last 4 days, am I right?
Yeah, they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can let the people into the meeting, Omkholo.
Yeah, I'm just going to let the speakers in first so that we can make sure that everyone can hear each other.
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
Hello, Marie Simone.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thanks. How are you? Thank you for making time for our online panel discussion. We have our project lead right here with us, Prof. Cheryl Potgieter.
Pleasure to meet you, Cheryl.
Good morning and pleasure to meet you, and thank you for being a panelist in our seminar this morning.
Of course, thank you so much for bringing me on.
I have electricity problems and it's not load shedding, so I just hope I'm going to be able to be with you for most of the time. And you are joining us from Zim, am I right?
No, so I'm actually based in Europe, but I am from Zim, so.
Oh, okay. No, because Omkholo told me you're joining this morning from Zim. I know you're not from Zim. So where are you with this morning?
I am actually in Amsterdam right now. Typically I stay in Geneva, but I move around a bit, so.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So what is the time in Amsterdam? Is it like 11 or 12?
So it's exact same time frame. Yeah.
Exact same time. Oh, okay. Spent a lot of my time in Amsterdam because I started a doctorate years ago in Utrecht. So I know the Netherlands very well. So yeah, but just thank you for being with us this morning.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
Marie
just
Simone.
losing
I just
you.
wanted to make sure that we can all hear each other. So that is great. I'm going to admit us first, as in the panelists and the people who are going to be speaking, just that we can all hear each other, and then just go through the order of proceedings quickly so we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Great. There is Ansley. And we also have High Commissioner Lobe, who has just joined as well. I think her audio is busy connecting. Hello, everyone. I don't think we all need to have our cameras on. We can switch them on right now just so that we can all see each other. And then it's just us who is logged in. I've kept everyone else in the waiting room, and then we'll admit them. I just wanted to make sure that we can all hear each other. So if you can just switch on our mics, just say hi, hi. If we have any issues, our technical people will hop in to assist us.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Law. And good morning, Ansley. I've just said good morning to Marie Simone. Omogolo, can I ask you just a logistical question? I would like a picture of all of us and our panelists. Is this the correct time to take a group picture? Because DUT IT won't do that for me, and they already WhatsApping me about it. So could we do that? Or I'll take guidance from you when we do that.
Right. So I think we can do that now quickly because Yasmina is only joining us at 11:30. It's 5 a.m. in Morocco right now. So she's going to join us at 11:30. So we'll take this one now, and then we'll take another one because High Commissioner also needs to leave after giving her input. So let's maximize on that opportunity now. In 3, 2, 1.
As you can see my camera, I'm trying to turn in the car because I'm going to another event after this, and so hopefully, but the lighting is terrible.
It's not
Good
that
morning.
bad.
We can see you clearly, and your red is showing beautifully. So...
Oh, we thank God. We thank God for that.
yes, it's all good. So Omogolo, are you going to take the picture?
Yes, I'm doing that now. Okay, great. Yeah.
You got it?
It doesn't look bad at all, I promise.
Okay, good. Good morning, High Commissioner. I'm Cheryl Potgieter, and I head the project, the GRRIPP project. Thank you for being here. Yes, I said to Omogolo, I remember your name from another life. You might not know me, but you know, 10, 20 years ago, ANC Youth League. So
I know I could recognize the name too. And
yes.
I said to myself, I believe we're grown up now.
Exactly. We try, comrade.
Yes,
we try,
yes,
Commissioner.
yes.
Yes. So we will, Omogolo, thank you again. And you'd admit our audience.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to admit everyone now. Quickly, order of proceedings, it's still pretty much the same. We're going to start with your opening address, Prof, and then we'll have High Commissioner Lobe giving her input. Then we'll have Marie Simone, then we'll have Ansley, and then we'll have Yasmina at the end. So I think we are all looking good. We'll have questions that will be logged into our chat, and then we'll have that engagement as well. So 10 minutes, it doesn't need to be long and lengthy. We are meeting online. People's attention span isn't really that long. So we are, yeah.
I see Marie Simone. I see Marie Simone is also here, but she was also in the picture. So we've not lost her. I thought for a moment we had lost her. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I see a few of us are logging in drips and drabs. I will ask you all as you join to please mute your mics so that we don't hear any of the background noise. I know people might be joining from their homes and a lot happens in that space. So we would like to not have that background noise intercepting with the main audio here. What I will do is just to give just 2 more minutes for our guests to join. We still have people trickling in, and I think it's okay just to give everyone a little bit of time. I want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Is the audio clear?
Hi, I'm Maholo. Yep, the audio is clear.
Thank you. Again, to everyone, please just mute your mics so that we don't have any background noise that will be interrupting us. We will now get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our online panel discussion, where we are going to be focusing on women's equality, youth participation, and leadership for better social incomes. This engagement is being hosted by Durban University of Technology's Office for Gender Justice, Health, and Human Development, as well as GRRIPP Africa, which stands for Gender Responsive Resilience and Intersectionality in Policy and Practice. We are part of a global project that is funded by UK's Research and Innovation through the University College of London. And we are committed to eradicating gender justice based here at the DUT. And the Africa Project, which is at DUT, we also fund projects that are located in Zimbabwe, Tanzania, South Sudan, and Uganda. Because we are part of a global project, we have the Latin America and Caribbean GRRIPP project that is based at Pontificia Universidad Católica in Peru, and our South Asia GRRIPP project is based at Dakar University. This engagement happens on the backdrop of us celebrating Youth Day in South Africa, which is this month. And our thinking of this engagement was to really look at attributing the contribution of Africa's development agenda and what the contribution of young people has been in elevating the position of women. Now, the case in point in South Africa's struggle for liberation against the apartheid regime, which was supported and led by young people. This is an unequivocal fact of history. We have seen other collective powerful acts by young people, such as Fees Must Fall and the Roads Must Fall protests. However, today, when we look at the Soweto uprising heroes, we have Tsietsi Mashinini, Dipelo Modwane, Hastings Ndlovu, and Hector Peterson, to name a few. But we don't see any mentioning of the contribution of young women at the time who did give some ideas, and they were part of realizing the collective objective. And since then, Youth Day has become a time to reflect on the generational mission of today's youth, to also make a rallying call for youth visibility and their representation. It is also crucial to critique the significance of Youth Day beyond the commemorative and nostalgic value. And so we want to ask critical questions, which is, what are the benefits of such an endeavor? What kind of future can we imagine when an undertaking such as this takes place? And what kind of tools of analysis should we be looking at equipping young men and women in order to enable them to realize better social outcomes for society? And with that outline of what this event seeks to achieve, I will take you through our order of proceedings. I will be followed by our project lead, who is also the head of department for Gender Justice, Health and Human Development, and that is Prof. Cheryl Potgieter. Our first panelist, who will then be followed by Prof. Potgieter, will be our High Commissioner, the High Commissioner of South Africa to Singapore, and that is Ms. Charlotte Lobe. She will be followed by the second speaker, which will be Marie Simone Kadorira, who is the communications lead at the Accelerator for Gender-Based Violence, Accelerator for GBV Prevention. Our third speaker, who is also our grantee partner, is Mr. Ansley Ndondo. He is the founder of Mwana Sikana Wanhansi, which is based in Zimbabwe. And our fourth panelist will be Yasmina Ben Slimane. She will be joining us from Morocco, and she is the founder of Politics for Her. And so with that said, I will hand over to you, Prof. Please take it away for our official welcome address. Prof, your speaker is on mute.
Hello and good morning again. Omoholo, you've cut into much of what I wanted to say, and thank you for that. I'm having electrical challenges, and it's not, it's my area, it's not load shedding, but I have set up all the infrastructure I have to be able to be here for most of the time. So a welcome, and a particular welcome to all our panelists. The commitment of our panelists is clear if you look at the time frame that they are talking to us this morning. For example, Yasmina, it's 5 a.m. in Morocco, and our esteemed High Commissioner, who's really, really busy, is in Singapore. And I think it's around 8 p.m. over there. So thank you for your commitment. And thank you to Marie Simone, who is talking to us from Amsterdam, and to Ansley Ndodo from Zimbabwe. So when we constructed and conceptualized the seminars that we are hosting, which is based in my office at Durban University of Technology, and let me say thank you to Durban University of Technology for providing the infrastructure for the GRRIPP network, which Omogolo has said is to promote gender response and resilience and intersectionality in policy and practice. So we have disbursed funds and support and infrastructure to a number of countries in the continent, in terms of the funding that I was able to secure with a grouping of people internationally. So it's an honor for me to head the African project. And this morning, our engagement is talking to gender issues specifically related to women and young girls. I'd like to say, other than maybe myself and esteemed High Commissioner Charlotte Lorbe, most of our panelists are probably 35 or under, and Omogolo, who is the head of communication for the project, is also under 35. So we also try to bring voices of youth and women and youth to the space this morning. Now, in South Africa, the 16th of June, which is 2 days from now, we commemorate the Youth Day, and a number of us will probably at primary school or slightly in high school at the start on June the 16th, 1976. We part of the 1976 generation. And it was youth that were challenging the apartheid state. We were asking for books in English, and we were bombed and killed. We are now many decades past 1976. Much has changed, and much has also not changed in South Africa and on the continent for girls and for women. We do know that if we talk about poverty, poverty is feminized, is the feminization of poverty. The majority of women in the world who are poor are young women and Black women. If we look at youth statistics, 18 billion people are youth in the world, aged according to statistics which I've looked at, between the ages of 10 and 24. And 600 million of the 18 billion people aged between 10 and 24 are teenage girls and young women. Omogolo spoke to the issue of gender-based violence, and I always think of Amartya Sen, when he spoke about missing women. Our women are not only missing because they often don't have access to resources and to like education and health, but they are missing because they are dead. They've been murdered as a result of gender-based violence. We also know gender equity and gender equality is not just a nice thing to do. If we don't have women leaders and young women leaders coming through, we are going to have challenges as we currently have in terms of economic development. I am going to leave it there because we'll engage as we continue this discussion, but just to say thank you, and we want to have an open, engaged conversation with all that are here today, our panelists as well as our participants. I'd like to welcome DUT academics and administrators and students that are with us today, and everybody that has logged on, including our GRRIPP partners in South Asia, in Latin America, and in Europe, and of course on the continent. Thank you, and I hand back to you, Omogolo. And I'm crossing my fingers that I'm going to have light and power in terms of electricity.
Thank you for that, Prof, for that warm welcome. Just a note to everyone who is on the platform, you are more than welcome to drop your questions that you may have as we continue with the discussion in the chat box. We will note them and we will make sure that we can address all of the questions. And I will now speak to our High Commissioner, Charlotte Lobe, who was appointed in her position last year. This is subsequent to serving at the highest echelons of government and international relations, where she occupied the role of acting Chief Operations Officer at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. She holds a master's degree in politics, majoring in governance and political transformation from the University of the Free State. She studied at the University of Manchester, UK in 2001, where among others, she was introduced to the field of international relations and gender studies. High Commissioner Lobe is also the focal person on women, peace and security, appointed in 2016 by the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. She also serves in the Global Network on Women, Peace and Security. In her leadership role within government, High Commissioner Lobe has served as a councillor that was between 1996 and 1999. She is a former member of Parliament from 1999 to 2004, and was a member of the Free State Provincial Legislature between 2004 and 2008. Her work in the legislative sector is a reflection of her activism and service to youth movements, women's movements, and various structures of the liberation movement. Thank you, High Commissioner. You can take.
Thank you very much, Omokolo. May I first ask that I don't turn my camera on because we are driving to an event, but I'm gonna stay on the call a little bit longer, so I'll join the event a bit later because of this. And also apologize on our behalf as the High Commission for the confusion around your event of today, but we are here. Let me stand on the protocols that were established at the beginning of the session and just recognize a comrade of many years and a youth activist of my time, Prof. Cheryl Potgieter. I am happy that we meet today, but in different capacities and with different title, rather than the one of being comrade that sticks forever. So I'm glad that a comrade of mine has convened this very important session today and is at the helm of this very important work. May I start by saying that gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but it is a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. And I say this also because of what Prof has just said, that in 2 days' time, we are celebrating or commemorating rather the uprisings of 1976. But to also say that in addition to 16th of June being declared the South African Youth Day, in 1991, it was declared the Day of an African Child by the then OAU, now the AU, in honor of the struggles of young people of Africa, but in close contrast with what happened in 1976 in Soweto that spread to many parts of South Africa. And for me, I believe that the topic of today that focuses on women's equality as well as the youth participation and leadership is important in the context of the day that we are celebrating 2 days to come, for a simple reason that in the continent of Africa, 50% or 52% of the population is made up of women, while 60% of our population is made up of young people. Now, this reflects a very interesting nexus between women's equality and youth empowerment and development. It is clear in my mind that if we were to think of women's equality without thinking of the situation of young women, particularly in the continent of Africa, will not achieve the kind of outcomes that we want in 2030. Now, there has been progress over the last decade on the girl child, young women, as well as women in the continent, but the world is not on track to achieve gender equality by 2030 as per the SDGs. Commitment and bold actions are necessary today to accelerate progress, including through the promotion of laws, policies, budgets, and institutions that advances gender equality, but also institutions that advances youth empowerment and development. Greater investment in gender statistics is vital, and I am happy that the University of Durban bill, DUT is part of this work that we are doing today, because it says that there is some investment that we are putting in R&D with respect to issues of gender equality and as well as youth empowerment and development. Now, since less than half of the data that we require to be able to budget, to be able to plan, to monitor and evaluate work around women's empowerment as well as youth empowerment, we will need to do more in order to ensure that we monitor the implementation of Goal 5 of the SDGs, because this less than half of the data that is required but not available presently means that we need to work harder to ensure that we have gender disaggregated data that can inform our choices and policy processes with respect to gender equality and women's empowerment. As I've said at the beginning, the nexus between women's equality and youth participation and leadership is extremely important if we are to achieve better social outcomes that will contribute positively to sustainable development. Various reports have also indicated that the average population age in Africa is 24 years, while the average leadership age is 64 years. This says to us there's a 40-year leadership generational gap that would require more resources into the empowerment of young people, majority of whom are young women. This also requires a mind shift in policy formulation, planning, and in sustainable development. Today, 30 million of 57 million children out of school in the world belong to sub-Saharan Africa, and it is believed that by 2050, almost a third of the world's children under 18 will be in Africa. If this is the case, there is an immediate need for us to look at how we would take the remainder of our children into school and make sure that as Africa, we prioritize human capital development. All of the many statistics that define Africa's complexity, this may be the most important one. And the statistic says that with 200 million people between ages of 15 and 24, Africa has the youngest population in the world. This demographic is expected to double by 2045. And as a result, Africa is expected to have a population that is young, but a population from where the world will have a lot of percentage as the labor force. The question is whether Africa's youth population is a ticking time bomb And this concern has been raised and expressed by the AU. I remember in 2018, the year was declared specifically to look at how we can harness our demographic dividend in order to develop our continent and ensure sustained economic growth and diversification. Now, today we have very important initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, which presents a huge opportunity for young people to accelerate Africa's industrialization and economic transformation through entrepreneurship. But we note that even though we have this huge opportunity and this very huge agreement, a trade agreement that has been signed by 55 African countries, but the huge problem that we're faced with is how are we going to ensure that we relax the barriers around export trade and make sure that young people truly benefit in what the Africa Free Continental Trade Area can provide. We need to monitor and evaluate youth policies and strategies by applying the same principles and methods of gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing. And as you would remember, in 2020, South Africa adopted the gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing framework as a guide for government departments, but by society as a whole, to consider a process where we do not only look at the outcome, but we focus on how we are going to arrive there. Hence, it is about how we plan, how we budget, how we monitor, how we evaluate, and also the kind of the auditing practices that we put in place that can be in such a way that they promote our gender responsiveness as a nation. This, in my view, will serve, if we're to put this kind of an approach to youth development, it will assist and serve as a resource that can be educational for those who are doing planning, whether in government, in academia, in the private sector, in civil society, but also it will assist us to ensure that as we budget for our programs, that there is a specific lens that we use. And this time around, my view is that it should not only be a gender lens, but it should be a gender and youth lens, because if we are to ensure sustainable development in the continent, we must make sure that we deal with the intersecting issues of gender, of age, of sexual orientation, of geography, because geography also plays a role in how we deal with issues that relates to gender and youth development, because young people who are in rural areas may not necessarily have the same opportunities as young people who are in urban or semi-urban areas. And as a result, intersectionality to us should not only be about race, gender, sexual orientation, it must also include issues of geography, so that we are able to deal with the challenges faced by young people living in rural areas. And as I conclude, may I wish you well in the program of today. But also, there's something that when I came to Singapore, I was asked. In fact, it was not even an ask. At the end of, after saving my credential papers, the president of Singapore, Madam Halima Yaqub, says to me, may you achieve what you are looking for. Now, this has stayed in my mind, and I believe it will stay in my mind forever, because we come into situations and sometimes, even though we know what we want, but we don't think about it as often as we should. And I believe that through the work that you are doing today, I hope you can achieve what you want. Thank you so much, and I wish you fruitful deliberations.
Thank you so much, High Commissioner, for really such a rich contribution on this topic. You know, what really stands out is there are challenges. You spoke about budget allocation and planning. You speak about the 40-year leadership gap in Africa because we are such a young population. And you spoke about policy and mindset planning. And the question that I would have for you just before you go is, are there gatekeepers when you speak about this, generational gap? And how do we get the gatekeepers to take an interest in developing this untapped human capital? Thank you. Are you there, High Commissioner?
I am. May I ask that you repeat the question?
I'll keep it short. So you spoke about a 40-year leadership generation gap because Africa's youth is so young. So what I wanted to ask is, are there gatekeepers? And if they are there, how do we get them, these decision makers, to take an interest in developing our young human capital?
Well, I would not say that they are gatekeepers, but I have seen the growth of what I would call generational disconnect. And in this case, generational disconnect would mean that you have different generations that are not really connecting, and generations that do not see in each generation value. And let me make an example with South Africa, because at least I understand a bit about what we do. Towards the conference of the ruling party in December last year, there was a call for the old to be kicked out and the young to take over. And when that call was made, it was precisely because I believe young people were tired of this thing of this generational gap, and they were saying that now is our time. But the problem with that is that you cannot kick people out like that. You need to ensure institutional memory, but we must also build some foundation through which the old can hand over gradually to young people. The second part is that the old people were seeing young people as a problem, and I'm referring to that in that context because they felt like young people are in a hurry to lead and all that. Now, from where I stand, the only way that can solve this kind of a problem is if we have generational solidarity, young people understanding the role of the old and the old understanding the role of young people as leaders of today and leaders of tomorrow. Because if we do that, it means that we can utilize the capacities that we already have, the expertise and experience that we have from the old, and we can utilize that to build second layer leadership. Now, that notion itself is what you are referring to as gatekeeping, because this generational disconnect means that we are not listening to each other. We are not appreciating the kind of contribution that each generation can bring to the table in building a country that we can all be proud of.
Thank you. Thank you for that response, High Commissioner. Just so that everyone is aware, High Commissioner will be in and out of this because she's currently on unofficial business. But thank you so much, High Commissioner, for that contribution. We will now move on to our second panelist, and that is Marie-Simone Kadurira. She is joining us from Amsterdam. And just a brief note about who she is. She is a biology and political science graduate with a passion for increasing healthcare access in resource-poor regions through evidence-based policy interventions. She has a flair for communications and advocacy tools, and she intends to use this knowledge towards gender and health issues in order to amplify crucial areas where there's a need for effective and sustainable change. Her experience spans from the United States all the way into different parts of Southern Africa. And her area of specialization is in sexual reproductive health and LGBTQIA centered work. Thank you so much, Marie-Simone, for making time for this engagement. And I will now hand over to you for your contribution.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction and for having me. Just going to share my screen because I have just a brief little visual that people can utilize to kind of follow along with what I'm discussing today. And so, as you've mentioned, I tend to wear multiple different hats, but today I think in particular, I'm speaking to the work that the Accelerator for Gender-Based Violence conducts. Basically, in a nutshell, what the Accelerator for Gender-Based Violence does is we are trying to advocate for more and better funding to go towards gender-based violence prevention work, as we've noticed that there's a huge gap in this specific area. A big part of our work is definitely conducting research and understanding funding landscapes. And what has really been coming up in a lot of the research that we're doing is youth engagement when it comes to gender-based violence prevention, and more generally, any work that pertains to improving the livelihoods of individuals is often stifled as a result of the way in which funding mechanisms currently exist. And one of the biggest barriers that a lot of the youth on the ground, in particular in global majority countries, such as those in Southern Africa, Africa in general, are really struggling with. And so what I'd like to discuss today, obviously using gender-based violence as kind of a case study, is the nature in which youth engagement is being stifled by the current funding mechanisms, and really what we can do moving forward, what type of advocacy we should be engaging in to ensure that youth engagement is something that's consistently supported, given just the sheer impact that I think youth engagement has across the board, and the ability for sustainable change to be nurtured when we're able to support youth programming, all of that stuff in whatever part of the world we're in. So just to give you a brief overview, I'm just going to give you a bit of information about the way in which the funding landscape is existing currently. So that's really big picture. And then looking at youth engagement as it pertains specifically to gender-based violence. But like I said, this can really be applied to so many other domains of practice. Following that, I'll then just let you know about kind of the barriers to success that we're seeing in our research as we look at funding mechanisms and the nature in which youth organizations are forced to engage with them. And then lastly, just some recommendations based off of the work that we do here at the Accelerator for how best we can really ensure sustainable change is being fostered, but also that the humanity and the holistic well-being of youth organizations is really being prioritized when it comes to the ways in which funding is actually structured. So to start us off with, like I mentioned, the funding landscape really, I think right now can be categorized within three main focused areas. So the first thing we're seeing is that there's a decline. And we see this because obviously we've just come out of COVID-19, and I use quote marks because that's very different in different areas. But because of the COVID-19, as well as what we're seeing as a debt crisis right now, there is a lot of overseas development assistance that typically goes towards grassroots organizations, goes towards governments, goes towards these impact centered institutions, is really coming down. And that is coming off of the back of a funding landscape that already was not really providing the necessary amounts of money that are required. So here we see 162 billion was provided in 2020, but it has been noted that about 3.2 trillion is required per year for us to be able, especially on the African continent, to reach the goals that we have set out, especially when it pertains to kind of these 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And the second area that we're seeing now as well as a result of COVID-19, but also, like I mentioned, the debt crisis that seems to be happening right now, as well as the shift towards other issues pertaining to kind of climate change, so on and so forth, we're seeing that funding priorities are largely shifting. And so the gender space is really feeling the impact of this. And if more generally kind of the gender space is feeling this, we can only imagine how youth engagement is being impacted by this, given some of the presuppositions around youth engagement and the propensity for them to actually enact change. So we're also seeing that a lot of the priorities are shifting, and money that was previously allocated to gender-based work is kind of being recategorized so that it can encompass multiple other things. And that's really diluting the ability for certain diverse stakeholders, such as the youth, to be able to participate in the work that's being done. And then the last big trend that we're really seeing is that funding tends to go to really large institutions, and that tends to keep out the youth and their ability to engage in whatever work is being done. So only 32% of aid funds are actually managed within the specific country. So whatever number we receive when it comes to overseas development assistance, only 32% is actually going to the donor country. And when you think of it in that way, a lot of that money ends up going to governments and all of those things. And in the absence of policy that really seeks to champion youth engagement, you find that the youth are often the last to receive any form of funding, despite the fact that they're doing a lot of the work on the ground that's really transformative and addressing some of the systemic challenges that are causing issues such as gender-based violence. So with that in mind, and just lovely segue into what youth engagement actually entails, especially as it pertains to gender-based violence, we see that really within the youth movements that we have been able to kind of map out and learn more about. We're seeing a lot of the youth engagement catalyzing societal transformation. So in the work that we do at the Accelerator, as we're pushing for gender-based violence prevention, there is an understanding that really guides us. And that understanding is that for us to be able to ensure gender-based violence is not something that's found in the future, we really need to look at the systemic issues that are there. And so, you know, the way in which gender is performed, the way in which gender is perceived, so on and so forth. So those types of changes, we're seeing a lot of the youth are the ones that are able to champion a lot of that. And they offer very fresh perspectives and innovative approaches as to how we can address the issue of gender-based violence, not only for generations before them, but also for the generations within that they are part of and the generations that are going to follow. And so we end up seeing kind of the startings up of breaking the cycle of violence in a way that's not just going to sort it out for a couple of months or a couple of years, but really is changing the mannerisms that inform gender-based violence to ensure that it's not something that's going to continue to be observed in the future. And I think also within youth engagement, there is a propensity to really embrace the diversity in different experiences. And so we find that we're also able to see the experiences of LGBTQ individuals. We're able to see the intersections between GBV and matters pertaining to, for instance, climate or health, so on and so forth. And so youth engagement is really pushing forward a lot of sustainable models for change and ought to be funded. However, we are definitely seeing that this is a challenge that a lot of them have expressed. And so these are some of the barriers to success that we have observed. And obviously, a lot of the work that we do at the Accelerator is to do with learning about the funding mechanisms, but there are many organizations that are also doing incredible research. And so we do also amplify that and want to be able to highlight the work that's being done. Frida, which is a young feminist organization, as well as the young feminist organization in AWID's Young Feminist Activism, have published a report that is quite enlightening in that it shows really the barriers to success that a lot of youth organizations are facing. So you see the way in which a lot of the funding mechanism requirements often require that you have had funding prior to and have managed a certain amount of funding over the course of maybe 2 to 3 years, which a lot of youth organizations just simply based off of the fact that they are youth, do not have that experience. And so we find there's a big barrier towards them being able to access funding in that regard. Another challenge that exists is the fact that with youth organizations, there's kind of this infantilization that happens, whereby there isn't a belief in the strength and the power of youth to really galvanize a movement and be able to enact sustainable change. And so we find that a lot of the applications tend to screen out organizations that are not seen as having kind of the sophistication or the purview of larger organizations and are not as established. And so then what ends up happening is a lot of fatigue is found within youth organizations. So within this report that was provided, 91% of the respondents felt as though their biggest barrier to success was access to funding. And then we also find that a lot of them are not being paid. They are working with volunteers. And also that's just the amount of money that is keeping them going throughout the year is really below $500, which is shocking, I think, in many ways, not only because it really limits their ability to reach as many people as possible, but also the well-being of these individuals is not being taken into consideration. And so really when it comes to what recommendations we would kind of put forward when it comes to the improving the landscape, the funding landscape, to ensure that youth engagement is actually being sustainable is first and foremost to provide core funding and support in a sustainable manner. And this really is funding that is not going to be restrictive in terms of it's not going to cover overhead, it's not going to cover transport. All of these different things are things that youth organizations rely on and they need support with. And so to be able to really support them in a way that ensures that they are well enough to continue doing this work, but also that the work is as impactful as possible. We really need to be able to looking at core funding and advocating for core funding to be provided over long periods of time, because I think then that goes into the second point. It allows for this embrace of vitality and change. So like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of the beauty and the power of youth engagement comes from their ability to embrace diversity, embrace change, but also just look at things very differently. And a lot of the times, because funding mechanisms are very much limited towards strict project timelines and tend to not be core funding, and so exclude certain elements of the organization's running or just organizational activities, a lot of the vitality and the diversity in youth engagement is often siphoned out, and it's just doing work that is foundationally expected to be looking at like reporting and all of that stuff. And that is definitely a necessary element. However, we find that in a lot of the reporting mechanisms, already the work that's being done by youth is kind of just being diluted down. And so it's important that we're able to embrace that vitality and change, both on a structural level, but also on the funding level. And the third thing I think would be to understand the context under which youth engagement exists. I think there are a lot of innovative ways in which youth are engaging with all of the issues that we are facing right now. Some avenues like social media, someone who works in communications, I've really seen the power of platforms that I think many people might perceive as not being serious enough or not being the time and place to discuss some of the issues that we're facing. But as was mentioned earlier, a large part of the African demographic are youth, and they are engaging on those specific platforms. And so it's important to really understand the context in which youth exists currently, both in the sense of what platforms are being used, but also what challenges we're facing and the ways in which these challenges are manifesting themselves in today's life, even if they have something that has happened before in the past. And so really to be important, because then I think the support is one that doesn't come from a top-down hierarchical perspective, but really champions the different perspectives and expertise that all of us have, and allows us to really speak to the challenges and be able to create a world that we'll be happy to live in the future. So yes, that is really my piece. Fund feminist movements, fund youth engagement. As a founder of an organization myself, this is really something that I can actually speak to from lived experience. Is definitely a challenge, and I really think funding youth organizations is one of the ways in which we can really accelerate the change that we are hoping to see in the world. So thank you again for the platform, and I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you for that, Marie-Simone. Funding continues to be such a recurring theme when we are talking about feminist movements, advocacy movements, youth-based movements. So those are very interesting insights that you have just shared with us. I have a question for you. You spoke about the barriers to success, and you also spoke about the barriers to funding and the infantilization of, youth movements. What then lies in the gap with these challenges that you've already mapped out for us? What lies in the gap in terms of impact and success of these movements as they face these challenges?
So if I'm getting your question correctly, you'd like me to speak to maybe what the impacts of these barriers are?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think in general, the biggest thing that I have observed, not only in my work with the accelerator, but also just in my own work, is the fatigue that is gained. And so we end up having a jaded demographic that is just succumbing to everything. And in many instances ends up turning to what is currently causing the problems that we're facing. I myself am from Zimbabwe, and I think our political leadership definitely has its challenges and its issues. And what I see with a lot of the youth organizations there is that because of this fatigue, they end up just resorting to doing the exact same things that the government is perpetrating, so on and so forth. All these organizations cease to exist. And when they cease to exist, then we really lose a crucial voice that can be there to be when we are crafting some of these things. And I think back to your mentioning of kind of the fight for independence in South Africa and the youth engagement. And I think they offered a very critical perspective. But in many instances, when it got to the higher levels, when it came to policy creation and how things were going to be monopolized on the ground, sometimes when those voices were lost, we are still seeing the impacts of that today. And so I really think it's that fatigue that we are observing, not only because it's taking away from the impact that could be observed, but also the youth are human beings who do deserve rights, who do deserve holistic well-being. But also then that fatigue creates a void in terms of the voice that could potentially provide a different perspective and address challenges that we continuously see repeating themselves time and time again. And so I think, that would encompass kind of the gaps that are there. And really that can manifest in so many different ways, but that's a good way to categorize it, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marie-Simone. I will now introduce our third panelist, and that is Ansley Ndondo, who is the founder of Mwana Sigana Wanhansi. He is a social worker, and his work at Mwana Sigana Wanhansi is to lead it to become a feminist organization that stands for the rights of young girls and women towards gender justice. This organization is a grantee of ours. They're based in Zimbabwe. And what their project focuses on is on countering female voter apathy and increasing more participation of female political candidates as they go towards the Zimbabwean elections, which are happening in the next couple of months in August this year. These are scheduled for August. And as an implementing organization, what they also achieve, have set themselves on achieving, is really creating a feminist well-being approach in their advocacy for the rights of girls and women. And they do this with zeal, with the hope of seeing more women who are going to be participating at the upcoming elections. And that is really through civic participation, civic engagement, and educating some people who are on the ground, specifically women, to know more about the elections, to understand their value in participating in electoral processes. And with that said, I will hand over to you, Ansley, to share your insights.
Thank you so much, Omoholo. Kindly confirm if I'm audible.
Yes. Nice and clear.
All right, thank you so much. I'm excited to be the only male in this as the panelist. I'll share about my insights and the work we've been doing here in Zimbabwe. Just to let you know that Zimbabwe has for the 2023 harmonized elections, which have been scheduled for the 23rd of August this year. The mood has actually started turning interesting. So I'll talk about the challenges mostly in terms of harvesting social results, social impact in terms of shifting the power to youthful voices. Here in Zimbabwe, we have been doing this feminist work since 2020, but the challenges that youth organizations face, some of them have been discussed by the previous presenter. The environment that we have, that we're operating in, really affects the operation of youth-led movements, because you talk about different bills that are expected to be passed. You talk about the PVO bill, the Private Voluntary Organization bill, which is currently causing the shrinking of civic space here in Zimbabwe. So those are some of the challenges that youth organizations are facing, and in mobilizing in terms of bringing social change. I'll talk also about the issues to do with male engagement that we have in our feminist circles. Omholo, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, perfect. I wasn't seeing your video, so I thought maybe I'm off. All right, perfect. So I'll talk about the most crucial part that I've noticed in working with young women in Zimbabwe for the past years. The issue of male engagement is still new in the feminist circle, and it has not yet been accepted. Why am I saying so? Because of the experience that we have gathered in terms of working with other feminist groups that are women-led. So the women's rights struggle is structured in a way that it puts boys and men outside and have women fighting for their rights from within that circle. So I feel that there's need to melt that circle so that we have both male and females working towards women's rights. Because as an organization, as Manaskana on us, we believe that women's rights are human rights, and both boys and men have to be part of the women's rights struggle. We believe that boys have to be taught about women's rights before they become men, and men and boys have to be on the table to talk about how we can shift power to the most vulnerable groups, which are girls and young women. Here in Zimbabwe, we have been doing work in terms of the project that we have as a GRRIPP grantee, where we're working in making sure that we mobilize young women to participate towards this upcoming election. But there's also one crucial part that we are doing as an organization. We do not just say women must lead. We also take it in to say that we have to develop and strengthen the capacities of young women so that they become better leaders. We believe that it's not just about having, say, 50-50 or having women be part of the decision-making processes. These women have to also be strengthened their capacities, because we believe that every woman has the capacity. So we don't need to develop their capacity, we need to strengthen them. So we have been doing work around that through our Musikana Simuka project, which is mobilizing these young women, not only that they participate as voters, but they also participate as aspiring candidates from the council level up up to the presidential level. We believe that women's issues are addressed if there is equal representation in the political spaces. When women are in the political spaces, that's where we can have them voicing their socio-economic issues that are affecting them. That's when we can get to see women debating on the budgets. So I believe that for us to have better social outcomes for women and girls, we have to include the male engagement strategy. This I explained as something that is still very new and unaccepted here. I'm speaking on behalf of my journey that I've traveled as a social worker. I previously, before I ventured into the organization that I now work for, I've tried to work for women's rights movement, but I've seen a lot of resistance in terms of accommodation as a male social worker. So in as much as we have that kind of barrier, it becomes a challenge because women can be in a room. We can have a room full of women. I always give an example, a room full of women debating their issues, debating how they're being abused by perpetrators. But as long as we don't have men and boys on that table, then we are slow to reaching our progress. We have to make sure that we work with boys and men towards positive masculinity, towards behavioral change for communities. So this can only happen if we have them on the table. So we're saying that the work that we're doing, men and women are not enemies in terms of gender equality. We're not saying that gender equality, gender equity is promoting women who are powerful and in the end, men don't matter anymore. We're talking about men and women being on the table, discussing issues that are affecting them, but also accepting that women are most vulnerable. So this is the work that we've been doing, but we still have a lot of work also in terms of actually alerting our funders across the globe. Women, youth organizations are underfunded, they're under-resourced. It's very hard to trust youth organizations with funds because of the inexperience in terms of capacity. So I believe that there's a message that also has to be sent to donors and funders across the globe, that youth organizations have to be developed their technical capacity so that they can be able to handle funds. Youth organizations are represented by young people. They know the needs of young people. So right now we have organizations which are, for example, being taught to being portrayed as to represent young women's issues, for example. But you don't see those young women in leadership spaces in that organization. You also have organizations that are representing the needs of young people. But where are the young people in the organization? So we need to have what we call an intergenerational decision-making, process across organizations. It has to start within the organizations. So also that issue has caused what we call organizations, where young people have their organizations. They have a permanent work of residence. They are seen some working somewhere because of the lack of core funding. So there's need to strengthen youth organizations for sustainability so that we have more social outcomes. We have to rely on shifting power to the youth organizations. So I'll talk also about, the work that we have been doing under our GRRIPP funded project. Elections are not an event, a process. So as a result, we have been working to change attitudes on women's participation in elections. The Zimbabwean environment is very different from any other country because the political environment is very, can be very, very, very dangerous, both to the organization and to the individual level. We have so many people who have just disappeared and we don't hear of them ever. So it's a very, very dangerous environment, especially when you're operating as a youth organization. So youth organizations in Zimbabwe are fighting so many battles. You talk about the political challenges, you talk about the financial crisis of sustainability. Youth organizations get advocacy grants that will sustain them for maybe months. And then after that, they make noise for the 6 months. They're doing work very well, consistent. But after the 6 months, the lights are off. What has happened? Youth organizations need to be financed for sustainability to make sure that they also pointed the impact of work that they're doing. So my journey as a male feminist, I've also learned that the enemy of a woman, the first enemy of a woman is a woman. Because that there's that difference, there's that that challenge that women don't support fellow women in other instances. So we also have to, have an instance where we have done a baseline surveys asking women, young women, would you vote for this candidate over this candidate? Some women actually prefer voting for another man than a fellow woman. So that barrier still exists. Women still needs to be taught about how to support fellow women in their circles. Before we talk about how they're being abused and other issues, we also have to make sure that women themselves, they tend to appreciate each other's talents. They tend to complement each other's weaknesses. They tend to be each sister's keeper. So that is another challenge that we have been witnessing in terms of our feminist group. So my final words is that there is need to have men and boys on the table. There's need to have women and boys and men and girls sit on the table, have an intergenerational dialogue to talk about how we can achieve gender equity in our different spaces of influence. But mostly, women have to be given the chance to lead. They have to be developed their capacity so that they lead. Their leadership campaigns have to be financed. They have to be taught how to run an election. They have to be taught how to draw lessons from that. They don't have to be afraid to get to the table. A women's place is not confined to the kitchen. Women have to be on the decision table. Women already are disadvantaged in terms of unpaid care work, in terms of other burdens that men do not bear. So my takeaway is, boys and men have to be taught about unpaid care work. They have to be on the table to talk about menstrual hygiene, so that they also add to the voice. In Zimbabwe, menstrual pads are very expensive. Most girls miss school in terms of menstrual, when they're having their menstrual period. The menstrual pads are expensive. Some girls and women have resorted to using in the rural areas of Morewa, they use cow dung and other, materials that are not suitable for menstrual hygiene. And this has to be voiced. For us to influence policy, we have to have men and women uniting to talk about women's issues. So I'm really glad about what has been presented by the previous speaker, who talked about the underfunded nature of youth organizations. It's high time we trust youth organizations to deliver. It's high time we give youth organizations the platform so that they can do their advocacy work, and they need to be mentored as well by these funders. And the last statement that I have to make is that funders and youth organizations, for us to have better social outcomes that are tangible, there has to be a relationship that exists between them that is more than just financial disbursement. There has to be a relationship that goes beyond funding financially. We have to talk about technical support, and also going forward beyond the the grantee period, to talk about how the organization is still sustaining. Thank you so much. Those are my remarks, and I'm so excited that the period of our implementation is in line as we head towards the interesting 2023 elections here in Zimbabwe. Thank you so much, Moholo, and thank you to the GRIPP team for the support. We appreciate.
You're welcome, Ansley, and thank you very much for your contribution. A question that I have for you, you spoke about the lack of recognition for women's place in society and women's empowerment in general. And this is essentially the work that you're trying to do. So what strategies have you really tried to implement in your community engagements to target this particular problem?
Sorry, can you come again? Can you come again?
Yes.
for the
So
question.
you spoke about the lack of recognition for women's
Lack of
place in
recognition.
society and women's empowerment. What strategies have you been employing in your community engagement?
Well, our organization has a male engagement strategy that we are using. The male engagement strategy has had dialogues and is still doing dialogues with men in Zimbabwe, with men in rural and urban Zimbabwe, to make sure that they understand the burden of women. We have done dialogues with women, they've worked, but now it's our time to speak with the boys and men, especially with the boys. I believe that we are having to talk to men about something that is very new to them. So we're also doing targeting boys to say at a very early age, let's talk about gender equity. Let's talk about you understanding women's rights. What do you understand about human rights? What do you understand about women's rights? But we do that in the language that they understand. We don't use these complex terms of gender equity, and we use the indigenous language so that they can grasp the concepts that we're teaching them about gender equity. Wanaska No Anasi also has a very huge social media presence. I think on Facebook we have over 20,000 followers. We are everywhere, Twitter and everywhere. So we have actually discovered that people in Zimbabwe also spend most of their time on social media. So we have also used that as a tool to make sure that we communicate our language with our advocacy with them. And most importantly, our male engagement activities have actually we have actually used what we call male gender champions as our training model, where we are training men towards positive masculinity, towards them understanding that women's rights are women's rights and the women's place is not confined to the kitchen. Men are now seen doing other roles that they believe that this was as a result of, a gender stereotyping that was happening in our community. So the male gender champions now, they're now training other men in the community, because we believe that we cannot scale up with our capacity as a young organization. We cannot reach out to every man in Zimbabwe. So the male gender champion strategy is making sure that those whom we have trained will now go to other areas and teach out and reach out to make sure that the gospel of gender equity is spread across all corners of Zimbabwe. This is what we have been doing. The other thing also that we have been doing is that we have made sure that with or without the funding, we make sure that we gather our men and teach them on what we are supposed to do in terms of gender equity, in terms of unpaid care work, in terms of other things that are affecting women, such that our advocacy becomes ongoing, continuous, and sustainable.
Thank you so much, Ansley, for that response.
Omogolo, it's Cheryl here. Hi, Omogolo, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I want to ask a question to Ansley. Ansley, I liked your presentation. It was very, very interesting. My comment, and the Cheryl Porchita here, head of project, if maybe you weren't online earlier, but I think you were. For decades, when I sit in seminars talking about women's empowerment, gender equality, the issue is raised that women don't support other women. And it's a topic that we've deconstructed, that we've engaged with, and you've raised it again, and I think it might present in that way, but if you really deconstruct and engage with the issue, I don't think we have any conclusive evidence that women don't support other women any less than men support women. So it's I wanted to raise that as something that we should engage with. But I really appreciate and thank you for your contribution here this morning, and I'll make some comments in my thank you address as well. But thank you, Ansley, and you are one of the projects that we have funded and it was a conscious decision that we fund small projects that don't necessarily have the experience that big projects have in doing work that leads to gender justice for all women. Thank you, Omogolo.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you again, Ansley. We will move to our fourth panelist, and that is Yasmina Ben-Slimane. Thank you for switching on your camera there, Yasmina. As I intro her, Yasmina is a feminist activist and a trained UN women peace builder. She has previously advised the UNDP and UN Women Regional Offices in the Arab states. And she is currently serving as a board member of the Pan-African Institute of Municipal Development. Yasmina is highly skilled in advocacy communications, media, human rights, policy analysis, research, writing, and public speaking. Some of the topics that she speaks on are related to gender equality, political participation, youth and women's empowerment, forced migration, and peace building. She holds a BA in political science and communications from St. Louis University, Madrid campus, and an MA in international law and the settlement of disputes from the United Nations mandated University for Peace. Yasmina is currently pursuing another MA in forced migration and refugee protection studies with the School of Advanced Study at the University of London. She is the founder of Politics for Her, a feminist youth-led movement and blog that encourages the inclusive participation of young women and girls in politics. It is almost 6 a.m. for you, Yasmina, in Morocco. I know you had to wake up very early at 5 a.m. to log in so that you can follow all of the contributions from everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and you are welcome now to proceed.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me. I hope that you can all see the presentation and that you can hear me clearly. I'm actually based in the Caribbean. That's why it's so early. I am in Puerto Rico at the moment, so that's why it's that early. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here with you today. So you already introduced me, so thank you very much for that. I will start by telling you a little bit about Politics for Her, for those who are curious. So just like Omogoro said, I studied political science in my undergrad. And during my studies, I've realized that when it comes to politics, the field was extremely male-dominated. So everything we would be learning in political theory was always from a men's perspective. But there was also this very distorted vision of politics. What we learned in class was that politics should be for the people, by the people, but that was not the case anymore. Very often politics were associated to corruption, to power, to greed, to money, to evil values. So I wanted to change this distorted vision. So while I was pursuing my master's, I decided to launch Politics for Her, which started as a blog. So I would share academic articles that I wrote during my undergrad. I would share news and cover women profiles, highlight women, inspiring women. So it started small. And fast forward, now we are a global movement, and we're led by young women, and for gender diverse people as well. And it's an intersectional feminist platform. That's very important for me, that it is intersectional, because it's very much needed. And we advocate for the inclusive participation of young women and girls in politics and in leadership positions. And when we say politics, we mean everything is political today. There's no such thing as staying out of politics. So it could be music, it could be architecture or business, and so on and so forth. Everything is political, so not just traditional politics, aka running for office. Our work, our mission is really to provide an initiative for young women and girls to break stereotypes, to grow more informed, specifically on issues related to international relations and politics and diplomacy, as well as encourage them by giving them the tools and the knowledge to be active participants in civil society. And our vision is to create a world where gender-based discrimination and stereotypes, as well as biases, are no longer holding back young women and girls from realizing their full potential. So our values are community, equality, diversity, inclusivity, intersectionality, as I mentioned, as well as youth-led. And what we focus on is leadership. So within Politics for Her, every single person is a leader. We do not really have hierarchy because we believe that everybody should be equal. Everybody should participate in the way that they can and that they want to. And it's also a way to empower. I'm also a women empowerment coach. So to me, like, empowering young women and girls is just helping them realize that everything they need is within themselves. We also focus a lot on digital advocacy. I know that it was mentioned in the previous presentations. As digital natives, as young people, we were born in digital technologies, and that's a key aspect for us. I believe in the powerful use of social media platform, and this started with 2010, 2011, when I saw the Arab uprising in Northern Africa, when I saw how young people were mobilizing and using digital tools to ask for more democratic values. So that also inspired me. That's why I wanted to launch Politics for Her as a digital platform at first. We also do policy dialogue because young people and young women in particular deserve to be influencing policies and decisions that are about them and that concern them. And finally, we're a global community, and I will tell you a little bit more about our different regional hubs right now. So I started alone, and that was in 2017, so 6 years ago. But now we have over 100 members, and we're volunteer run because, as you can imagine, it's really hard to have sustainable funding. As Simone mentioned earlier in her presentation, it's a daily struggle for youth-led organizations, especially from the global majority countries. Most of our members are from the global south, and because we wanted to have this more inclusive approach and we wanted to be more diverse, we decided to launch regional hub, focusing on particular regions, but also adding new languages. So we have Africa, we have Asia, we have Ibero-America in Spanish and Portuguese, Europe and Swana in Arabic, so Southwest Asia and North Africa. We try to use also decolonial terms instead of using terms such as MENA. Then, yes, so we have a large community now of thousands of members and followers and subscribers and partners. And as I mentioned before, we really want to break typical stereotypes related to young women and girls, but also inform our audience. One of the main reasons why I launched Politics for Her is because I also studied communications in my undergrad, and when we touched on topics related to journalism or political communication, I would notice that mainstream media would be very Western-centric, and it would always cover the news with a lack of global majority perspective, with the lack of youth perspective, with the lack of feminist perspective. But then when they do cover the global majority countries, it is with this Western gaze, it is with this white saviorism, but also always little to no media coverage. So I wanted to change that. And I remember when I started, I would cover things that would happen, let's say in Bangladesh or in Congo, and people would thank me from these countries. Thank you so much for covering that, but also for not having this condescending tone in your approach. So that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to launch Politics for Her. So our perspective through our eyes, instead of always relying on Western media, mainstream media for news coverage. So we conduct a wide variety of different activities. We still have the blog entries. So actually during the pandemic, this is the moment, since we were all confined in our homes, that's the moment where I decided to make Politics for Her more collaborative. So I made a launch for submissions, and I got, I think, around 50 submissions. And remember, at that time I was alone, so it was very overwhelming, but I was so happy to work on that. So we've highlighted young women from all over the world and from different fields as well. So we had topics related to international security as well as to sustainability, just to show that women have their place everywhere, that they are capable, that they are brilliant, that they are outspoken. And as mentioned earlier, we also do digital advocacy. So whether it is through digital petitions or digital strikes, or open letters or press releases, this is something that we do a lot. Something else that we do are consultations. So if you look at this picture, this was a consultation that we held with UNHCR Morocco, and we did a consultation on gender-based violence with refugees, and that they shared their experiences, and now we have written a report and it should be released very soon. So stay tuned for that. And of course, we do workshop. So we do monthly workshops. If you want to volunteer for a workshop, if you want to participate for a workshop, to one of our workshops, follow our social media platform or subscribe to our newsletter. We always advertise that. And we also have a podcast. It's called Talks for Her. We have 5 episodes on it, and we're planning on doing a second season soon. And we do capacity building programs. And more recently, we've been doing policy briefs. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the 2 programs that we've been implementing. The first program is the Women for Leadership program. So that program was really to raise awareness and break social norms related to patriarchal stereotypes in terms of sexual reproductive health rights, and specifically that took place in Morocco. So we helped strengthening the role of young women and girls, including migrants and refugees, and the capacity for their actions in the fight against gender-based violence, as well as access to reproductive sexual health rights, and the advancement of comprehensive sexuality education. As you all know, within the African continent, in many countries, comprehensive sexuality education is out of school curriculum. So that leads to gender-based violence cases. So we thought that we should do a program like that, that is groundbreaking and that is going to break those typical stereotypes according to which it's taboo. We spoke about menstruation, but also that's within Islam, within Islamic tradition, that there's no such thing that implies that menstruations are impure, but it's more social norms and the way that it has been constructed, because, you know, like women cannot go to the mosque, they cannot touch a Quran. So we also touched upon that, you know, like how important it is to have this local context. So our young women, and within this program, we had a group of experts from civil society in Morocco, so doctors, so, you know, like intergenerational dialogue that came and that gave us workshops during almost 3 months during this program. And at the end of the program, they all had to implement their own project. They all had to write blog entries on topics they were very much interested in related to those main thematics. We also launched a petition and an advocacy campaign on legalizing abortion in Morocco, at least in cases of rape, incest, and threat to the mother's health, which is still criminalized. And it's crazy to think that because there's been many cases of very young girls that have been through rape, through forced abortions and unsafe abortions, so that died due to the consequences of that. So we really wanted to involve young people in that, and young women in particular, because those are decisions about them, that concern their health, their well-being. So it's been extremely successful. And then we also did the Young Feminist Scholars Program. So this one is more towards policy. And at the end of the program, these 8 young women have all published policy briefs that I invite you to visit on our website. So this program is meant to any student, so regardless of gender, who is extremely passionate about feminism and gender issues. So here we had LGBTQIA+ members. We also had asylum seekers, migrants. So we had a wide variety of young feminist scholars, indigenous as well. And yes, so whoever is passionate about feminism and gender issues, and whoever is in either undergrad or grad school, and is passionate also on issues related to gender-based violence or women's political participation, particularly within global majority countries, then that program is for you. As I said, like, we just wanted them to be intersectional feminists. I wrote international, but I meant intersectional feminists, and showcase leadership. Because it's really this opportunity, you know, like most of the time, it's kind of like an internship, right? Most of the time when young professionals, young students, I mean, they want to gain experience, practical experience, and then they do internships, they don't really learn anything. I've been there, you know, it's more like, oh, just do this, do that, you know, and I did not want that within our program. I wanted it to be really like, you do whatever you're passionate about, you cover what you're interested in. I'll give you the training, I'll give you the knowledge, I'll give you the tool, but it's all you. And that way, you could truly see that young people are thirsty of knowledge. We covered research from an intersectional feminist lens. We did policy writing, we did communications, we did advocacy. So we covered all of these different topics and thematics and skills so that they can see what they would want to focus on within their early career. We touch upon all of these so that they see what they like, what they don't like, which is part of the process. So that was also really amazing. And now I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned through Politics for Her, the benefits of youth participation, leadership, collaboration, intergenerational collaboration, and partnership in particular. So when engaging with youth organizations and NGOs and community stakeholders within all of the diverse experiences we had, we've seen how the transformative power of involving young people in decision-making processes, because their active participation truly ensures that the diverse perspectives are considered. And I could really say that even more for Generation Z. I love learning from even the younger generation. I'm always in awe. Some of the team members are only 16, 17, and they're so fierce. I'm like, I wish I was like you at your age, because you're so inspiring. You inspire me. And yes, so they lead to more inclusive and effective policies because they leave no one behind. They think about everyone. And while we collaborated with local youth organizations within all of the different regions that I have mentioned, we had successful campaigns, for example, like the one I said in Morocco about sexual education. We empowered young people with vital knowledge for their well-being, because those are not thematics that are within the educational curriculum. So what do people turn to? They turn to social media. And in an age of disinformation and misinformation, we must be here to put valuable content out there. We must be here to educate the youngster and to make sure that they have access to the proper resources, to the proper tools, and the proper knowledge. So we need all of us out there on social media advocating for the common greater good. And as I mentioned, also like building intergenerational partnership to exchange knowledge and expertise is key. As much as I love to focus on the young generation, because they're not only the future, they're also the present, I think that it's important to learn from the older generation as well, because it's an opportunity to harness the wisdom and experience of older generations, while also empowering them, young people, to drive for change. And that's something that we did also, particularly with the Women for Leadership project. As I mentioned, we invited doctors that they shared their experiences with us, like abortion rights activists, and it was really insightful. And and also right now we are just about to launch a mentorship program. We already received over 600 applications, which is crazy, but also shows you how young people need mentorship, that they're craving for mentorship. So we just opened application for Connect Her, and it's a mentorship program that will put together experienced professional with the early career or just a university student to foster leadership skills and help them accelerate their impact. And we will touch a lot on soft skills because I know that we think a lot about hard skills like resume and cover letter and interview and so on and so forth. But we also believe that soft skills are absolutely necessary because, again, this is not something that is taught to us through the educational curriculum. Then another benefit is to encourage cross-sector collaboration for comprehensive solutions. So breaking down silos and collaborating across sectors is really crucial because, again, as I said, everything is political, but also we have this youth feminist participation and leadership through all of the different thematics that we cover. We have climate justice, we have forced migration and refugee protection, gender-based violence. I mean, it's through all of the different topics. We must uphold this feminist youth-led and meaningful participation. And by bringing together like diverse stakeholders, by bringing together diverse stakeholders, we have been able to develop holistic solutions that tackle the root causes of gender inequality. And through cross-sector collaboration with NGOs, government agencies, and private businesses, we have successfully advocated for gender-responsive policies. So if you go on our website and you look at our partners, we have a wide variety of partners ranging from NGOs to youth-led organization, but also UN agencies or the African Union, for example, too. Now I want to talk also a little bit about the importance of youth engagement.
Yes,
in
Mina, I'm going to rush
Yes.
you for time.
Oh, yes, sure.
Yeah. If you can just have a look at what you can quickly skim through to get us to the last point.
Yeah, that's actually the last point. So yes, I just wanted to say that youth engagement to fight GBV is absolutely crucial because young people are agents of change, but also catalysts for societal transformation. And we have witnessed that again through politics for her. That was like my last point. I don't have to go through it, but I also want to emphasize on the importance of amplifying marginalized voices and never speaking on behalf of people. This notion of the voice of the voiceless is not something that we align with. So it always, please make sure to amplify the voices of marginalized groups, young women and girls on the move, indigenous communities, those with disabilities, LGBTQIA+ individuals. And I had some recommendation, but basically that foster youth leadership, support, fund, just like it was mentioned, invest, and also create collaborative platforms. And you can follow us on social media, Politics for Her for everywhere, except Instagram, we have the regional hubs. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Yasmina. Such a rich contribution there, so much work you are doing. I know that Prof is a bit pressed for time. I do have a question for you. Prof, do you have a question?
No, it's fine, Umkholo. Continue because I'm running with no electricity, set up another device, but my Mac might sleep quite soon.
Okay.
So go ahead. I'm not
Okay.
pressed for personal time. It's my infrastructure that's failing me at the moment.
Okay, I understand. Yasmina, you know, essentially a lot of the work that you're doing, the workshops, the capacity building programs, the academy, the scholars program, it's intersectional feminist work. And you're working with feminists, you're working with asylum seekers, you're working with queer people. It's such a broad range. How do you bring it all together for all the participants to identify with, you know, what intersectional feminism is? Or are you more interested in the education and bringing the message across? That's what I was really interested in asking, because you're dealing with such a diverse group of people.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think that the most important is to create a safe space where there is no judgment, and most importantly, to embrace values that are not commonly portrayed in leadership roles, but like compassion and empathy and kindness. Those are the values that are needed in leadership, and those are most of the time associated to being feminine values. And that's what we advocate for, that we need more of these feminine values in order to heal the world, but also in order to get to a more peaceful and equitable and just world, is by having these values. And within everything that we do also, like within the feminist space, self-care is absolutely key. So by providing these safe spaces where there's no judgment, where, like regardless our differences, we come together like as intersectional feminists, and that we always make sure to mention that, then we have those people from diverse backgrounds that are united within the same mission of bringing positive change to the world, and by realizing that they are, just by being themselves, a contribution to the world.
Thank you for that response. I've noted that. Prof, we will move over. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the comments. We will jump right to the Q&A. Do we have any questions? I've seen more comments in our chat, but no questions. If I am correct, are we then going to move over to our closing remarks to the prof? I just want to double check that everyone is happy and satisfied and there are no questions, just comments. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. Prof, I'm handing over to you.
Maybe there's a question or a comment from one of the participants to another participant, but if not, I will move to very, very brief thank yous and comments. Maybe I thought maybe Ansley or possibly even the High Commissioner might want to pose a question or comment to one of the other panelists, but if not, I could just do my closing remarks. Nothing.
Yeah, and I remember the High Commissioner has already jumped out of the meeting to go.
The High Commissioner is in the meeting. I see her online. But let me start maybe with my thank yous and comments. I want to just thank each and every panelist and all the participants that have been here today. Let me start with Yasmina, our final panelist. Thank you so much. I'm actually quite blown away by the organization that you lead. I'm hoping that DUT and from my office, we could engage more with you to see how young women from our space could join your organization, and also, of course, our awardees and young women in those spaces. I take a particular positive note on what you said in terms of there's also so much overlap with what you said and each of our panelists, including our High Commissioner from South Africa to Singapore, who spoke about the issue of geography and of course women in rural areas, and all the panelists made it very clear that gender justice for young women needs to take into account the issue of intersectionality, because women are not an homogeneous grouping. The commissioner and others also spoke about that women and young women, youth need to lead, to we need to find a way, generational dialogue. And as you said, one of the key advantages of intergenerational agreement is engagement, that the wisdom and Ansley spoke about the role of men, and that men should be in supportive spaces. Let me just use that in inverted commas, and the issue of positive masculinity. You also spoke about the issues of humility and kindness, and recently it's also emerged in the work of Kopano Ratele, who is one of the great scholars on masculinity and is based in South Africa. I'm a psychologist by training, and of course, the issues that in the last 3 or 4 years, we've also recognized the role of mental health. And like you said, self-care is important to women and girls. Our panelist that was based or spoke to us, Maury Simone, and she was talking from Amsterdam, but she's from the continent, spoke very, very, very clearly about funding feminist movements. And funding is important, and GRRIPP project, we were very clear that we fund feminist movements, we fund youth, and we also fund smaller organizations that generally are not funded by international donors. So the funding landscape in youth was really, really important, and I was happy that was engaged with. I would like to say to all our panelists that I'm hoping that our conversation today could be a start, but not the end of our engagement with you in various spaces. And I was also struck by the wisdom that the Charlotte Lobe spoke to in terms of what she was told when she moved, in inverted commas, to Singapore. And she said that the words rang out clearly with her. And for me, I've been thinking about it throughout this presentation, and she said she was told that may you achieve what you are looking for. And I really, really hope that the GRRIPP project that I lead will achieve what we are looking for, but that each and every organization that was here today, that you may achieve what you are looking for, and our participants who, of course, are our allies and partners and stakeholders, that you all may achieve what you are looking for, and that we keep the F word in our spaces, which is feminism, funding, and also the word that was brought to us, the issue of kindness and humility. I think a gender revolution will not be achieved, of course, if we don't have young women and young people as key to whatever transformation we are leading. Thank you each and everyone for being here today. Omogolo, as head of my communications team, my team, thank you very much for facilitating it here today. It's really, really, really appreciated. And in closing, I know that we all are going to achieve what we are looking for. And I thank you very much for being here with us today. I might lose you. The neck is dying.
Thank you so much, Prof. Just like you, I've had to switch devices because of power cuts where I am. But that marks the end of our online panel discussion. Thank you so much, everyone who has joined us, including our panelists. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye,
Good to see you.
everybody.
Bye.